This may be the world's most boring stream ever. This one has been giving me all kinds of trouble. It's funny how just the right amount of shadow can either help or hurt you. Oops. I'm having a very hard time getting the symmetry down on this. I'm noticing that the cheek on this side comes out a little bit more than I've got it on the left side here. That's a little bit of an issue. I gotta make this one a little bit thicker. So we'll do a little of this. Here's me knife. I'll leave me knife. When the clock strikes 6:30. Yeah, nobody wants to hear me sing. Ever. Yeah, my dog complains when I sing, and she's going deaf. Thanks for stopping in, Purple Valkyrie. See if you can recognize who it is or who it's going to be. The female sculpts get a rooted hair wig. Bear with me a second. I'll see if I can get a hold of that wig that I have and throw it on there. You can take a look at it. 1 second. Oh well. I can't seem to find the wig. I'm sure it'll turn up. That looks a little bit better. Female faces are always so much more difficult. Everything is just so much more subtle. Okay, try this. Step out of the way here. Okay. Now this is, excuse me, being that this is a female head sculpt, you can see how the wig attaches to the back of the head. So what I did was I made a mold and a cast of the chassis, basically, that a female head came off of, so it saves me a lot of time trying to figure out how to get those measurements exact so that it fits the wig exactly. So now I'll take a little bit of rubbing alcohol. If you can see how rough the surface is on this side of the face. Okay, take the silicone tip. And just lightly dissolves the Sculpting. Gives you a really nice, smooth texture. So between the softness of the silicone tip and the alcohol dissolving the clay, makes everything much more gradual in your shape. That's a little bit better. So this is going to be Nina once I get it fixed up to where I want it. Which I think the sculpture is pretty close. Although I will be making some adjustments here and there. I put this up for a few days so I could look at it with some fresh eyes. After you've been staring at something for a while, it tends to lose your perspective with it. You can't really see like the flaws that you sculpted into it. We're getting better. Comparison shots. Tell me a bit more right there. Let's see. There's a little tiny ridge in there I didn't like. It was interesting when I first started doing this, I just tried to copy basic shapes inside the face, just going off the photos. And I was talking with a fellow I became somewhat casually friendly with, who was a sculptor for Sideshow. He works for NECA, and he gave me some really good pointers. His name's Trevor Grove. He's phenomenal. He's a prodigy. He was sculpting professionally at about 16 years old. And he had suggested I send him some pictures and asked him for a critique. And he was like, the best advice I can give you would be to study some of the facial anatomy. And once I got to learn some of the muscles and where the muscles attach inside the face, it really made a big difference in understanding some of the the angles that you get into. I have such respect and envy for a lot of these sculptors. A lot of these guys will sculpt in wax. It's something I want to try someday. They get a wax pen and they heat up the wax and they work on a very, very small scale. It's very delicate and very soft looking in the appearance. A lot of people ask me why I don't sculpt digitally, and it's just a whole other realm, a whole other discipline, which I haven't even gotten this one down yet. So I really can't dedicate myself to another one. Okay. Let's see now. Let's see if the camera will pick it up. There's definitely a lack of symmetry in the nostrils coming from the bottom. So I'm going to have to try and fix that. It doesn't seem like it, but it will definitely throw off your likeness in how the nose sits in there. Like that. Find my styluses. These things come in so handy. It's funny, I went to Amazon just to order the silicone tip sculpting tools, and it came with this really teeny tiny styluses. It's like, ooh, I can definitely work with that. This is sort of just a best guess when you're asking your model to send pictures. They probably wouldn't understand if you were to ask for pictures showing up their nose. A little bit more balanced. Still need to go a little bit more on this side. Let's check the photo source. When I was in art school, we had a visiting professional come in at one point, and his specialty was caricature. And he did a 2-day lecture on caricature and brought up a couple things that were really important when you're when you're looking at a caricature, it's how to, you can do one of two things. If, like you're doing, happens a lot with political cartoons, you can either highlight the negatives in someone's face or you highlight the positives. And you just have to figure that, like, and one of the hardest parts about this is that when you're looking at things, if you try to sculpt everything in exact detail, you end up with a whole lot more lines in your sculpture. And the more lines that you put into a sculpt, the older your model will look, which is fine if you're old like me, but certainly lovely young women do not want to have lines depicted in their face. That's why when people say to me, your face has so much character, I was like, oh, you mean it's been beat up a lot. I think I'm going to have to adjust this bottom lip a little bit over there. And that's going to be tricky because I'm going to have to make a very, very fine tube. I want to roll the clay. Side of the lip is off. Now the trick is to put just enough clay on there so that it balances out. Not so much that it overcompensates. Which is always tricky. One thing I found with doing female sculptures is that you have to find a balance between, if you make everything too symmetrical, it looks too Barbie-like, too fake, and it loses the resemblance. And of course, you definitely want to have a feeling of resemblance in your sculpture. The hang of this camera thing feels like I'm holding it straight. Oops. The camera is very helpful, so I watch it on screen. I can see different angles and levels of detail that the eye isn't necessarily picking up. Okay, so this eye is definitely much larger. When I say much larger, it's not a whole lot, but definitely needs an adjustment. Again, when you're working in something like 6 scale, the tiniest piece of clay makes a huge difference. Eyelids are always tough. The hardest part is finding a tool that you can get in there with that's going to be narrow enough and yet still give you enough contact. It's a little bit better. It's interesting too because on this, like, people's eyes are never exactly, one will always be a little bit higher or a little bit lower. Little deviations. You have to try and capture that as best as you can. Okay, I think I need to take a look here, right in there, at the shape of the, oh yeah, see, I'm looking at it this side. See, this is elevated a tiny bit more than it is on this side right there. So I need to fill in a little bit more. That's what was throwing off that angle with the shadow. So I need a little piece, little triangular piece. We'll say just about that big. And go right there. I think this is my favorite sculpting tool right here. I modified it down from a lockpick set. It was originally the other one. It's pretty close to the same size. There's the original. Oops. So you can see how much smaller I used the grinder and cut this one down. It's got a nice angle to it. It lets me get inside a little bit deeper. when she was sending me pictures of this. I was working on doing a she was saying how she wanted a little bit of a smirk. So I'm trying my best to add just the slightest. What's funny, like every time Hot Toys comes out with a new product, a new release, every single time that they try to put some kind of expression on the face, there's always a lot of fan backlash. A lot of complaints about how it doesn't look right. It doesn't. Now, oddly enough, I think what happens is when you're looking at someone and they have a facial expression, we actually read into we focus on a couple attributes of the facial expression. And because when you see the still pictures or the captures that they've used as reference, the sculpture looks very, very accurate to that still. And our minds kind of do a little bit of a fill in the blank kind of thing. And we picture that sculpture. It's more of a perception kind of thing rather than an accurate kind of thing. We perceive it in a certain way, and if it doesn't match up with what our eyes see or what we think our eyes see, then we have a problem with it. I'm not sure what Hot Toys uses for their sculptures, how much is digital and how much is sculpted by hand like this. I know they used to have everyone sculpting by hand, but imagine it's probably sort of a hybrid. What do you think? You see a little bit of Nina Infinity there? Still a little bit more pronounced. I must have touched it when I was adjusting the nostril. I just did the slightest touch on that upper lip and squished it in a tiny, tiny bit. Oh, that's frustrating. It's even more frustrating when you catch it after you've cured it in the oven. That's infuriating. Some things after it's cured you look at and you'll take a little bit of sandpaper to something to try and adjust your master. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Let me check my photo source. All right. I'm pretty happy with it overall so far, but I think I want to highlight the eyelids just a little bit more. So I got this guy. Push up here just a little bit. This eyebrow is a little bit higher, more pronounced. Sometimes people just paint on the eyebrows. I like to give a little bit of texture to it. I think it keeps it a little bit more grounded, a little bit more realistic looking. Still a little bit more pronounced. I think I need just a tiny bit more. It's always a tough part is connecting two pieces of clay. One thing I found too was to make, if you make the eyelid too pronounced, it looks really heavy, especially after paint is applied. When I cast this, I will be using just a little bit of tint inside the resin. There we go. Eyes are a little bit more balanced, but I think I am going to drop this bottom lid down a little bit. Right about there. Okay. want to get my facial structures down just right and smoothed out before I add texture to the skin. I have to a little indentation right about there. Temple area in the skull. Okay. It's very hard to drink a cup of coffee with these goggles on. I found that right there. That's it. Come in a little bit more on this side. There's little muscles in the lower lip. That really change shape. Sometimes you have to take, when you smile and you put any kind of expression, sometimes you have to put a little bit of artistic license in there and sort of suggest to the eye what you want it to see rather than what's actually there. Now, I said this would be getting a wig, but we're going to add a little bit of wispiness for hair that goes around the ears. Not sure exactly what you would call like the female equivalent of, not quite sideburns, it's just sort of like as the hairline follows down. So that you see a little bit of texture. I'm sure. Some of the wigs are the way they sit isn't necessarily the way that you might want it. Like, for example, when I did my daughter's, she has sort of a widow's peak, and of course, like the head just kind of sits flat with where you see the forehead, but you don't really see the. It's very difficult to make a widow's peak, so you have to get a little bit creative. I've done this with some other sculpts where you actually kind of like leave a little bit in the middle. With your sculpture, you actually cut in here a little bit, and that can actually give you a little bit of a widow's peak. Apple here, so I'm noticing some of the texturing wasn't very smooth in the forehead. It's funny, all these little shadows that you get when the clay is soft. Well, it's nice working with this gray because it does give you a pretty flat appearance. But once it's hardened, all these little waves that you might find in the clay become so apparent. And your only recourse at that point is to sort of sand it down a little bit and hope that it's passable. The paint applications are also very critical with this. It's probably my weakest area. I've actually thought about hiring my daughter, who is phenomenal with colors and shading. But I've seen really great sculptures that are completely ruined by a bad paint job, and I've also seen average sculptures that are really brought to life with a wonderful paint job. I have a friend of mine who he paints professionally. He paints action figures and prototypes professionally, and he's been kind enough to give me some pointers over the years. And it's absolutely frightening how how good his paintings are. He'll take commissions on painting a 6-scale head sculpt, and will run over $200. And he may be sitting in his desk for a year before he gets it back to you. But when you get it, and you own a Nathan Eakins head sculpt, especially the eyes. I mean, every single thing that he does, I have yet to notice a weak area that he's got. But he puts so much detail in the eyes. It's if you have Facebook and you want to see some of his work, it's Nathan Eakins, Silent Surfer, and you can see his photo galleries there. And he has an Alec Guinness Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you look at the blue in those eyes that he does, it's absolutely frightening how accurate it looks. There's such depth and such detail in the eyes. You looks like you actually see into the eye. It's phenomenal to believe that you're looking at a piece of plastic. Ideally, we'd want a sculptor and a painter working together. There we go. Okay, I think that's going to be it for now. I'll put this up for a little while. I'll give it another little 20-25 minutes probably to smooth in some of these details of the clay where it merges into the plastic. And then I'll start adding texture. I'll double check it against my reference photos to see what I can do to tweak it a little bit and see where we go from there. But probably this should be going into a mold probably by about Tuesday. Okay. Well, thanks for watching.